Welcome to Virtual Office Hours, Building Your Law School Budget, brought to you by the American Bar Association and nonprofit AccessLex Institute. The Virtual Office Hours series connects you with experts to help you thrive as a law student and prepare for life after law school. We're really excited to have Justin Zieman with us today to explain how to build your budget for law school. Justin is the Regional Director for Central Region at AccessLex Center for Education and Financial Capability. Justin has over a decade of experience in financial aid administration and financial education initiatives with graduates and professional students. Justin, we'll turn things over to you.
Great, thank you very much, Tracy. And again, welcome to the virtual office hour session for building your law school budget. And as Tracy said before, I work with AccessLex Institute. A quick blurb about us. So we're a nonprofit and we work to help as purpose-driven students like yourselves find their path from aspiring lawyer to fulfilled professional. And we've been doing that for about 39 years now. We're going to celebrate our 40th anniversary next year. So anything you need, always make sure you come and visit our website and we'll try to set you down the right path. So for the purposes of this presentation, I want to read our information to you. So the resources provided here tonight are for your informational purposes only. And although designed to assist you in developing your personal financial strategy, these resources are not intended as personal investment, tax, or legal advice. You should consider whether the information is appropriate for your unique needs and, if applicable, seek individualized advice from a professional advisor. So as we are talking about building your law school budget, I want to bring to light one quick collaborative event that we did with the ABA Young Lawyers Division. So we had a study in 2021 where nearly 60% of respondents cited they started feeling depressed or hopeless about their $200,000 or more in student loans. And if you want to look more into that study and how it affected past students, especially during the 2021-2020 transition, go ahead and take a screenshot of the slide. It'll take you right through that QR code or grab one of the links on the slide there and you can read more about it. But as we discuss building your law school budget, we're going to focus on two main aspects of the entire financial foundation, as we like to call it. Today, we're going to focus on borrowing and spending. And the way we look at that, we look at basically 5 pillars for budgeting foundations. And they're listed out here, but we're going to black them out 2 through 5 because we're going to tackle one at a time. So number 1, as that budgeting foundation, we want to list the needs and wants for our upcoming cycle. And we usually try to do this on a monthly basis. So how do we do it? It's as easy as this. You just set it up 1 through 5 on a sheet of paper, track down 5 things. What do I need to spend money on this month? Usually that comes in forms of, hey, I need a roof over my head in school. I need food in my belly in school. I need transportation to and from school to make sure I can get to class. Things of that nature. Those are what you need to spend money on each month. But there's also wants. What do I want to spend my money on each month? What do I want to do on the weekends? What are my hobbies that I want to do outside of studies? What do I like doing other than having my nose planted in a book 24/7? So think about those things in the back of your mind, jot them down on a piece of paper. What do I need to spend money on each month? And what would I like to spend money on each month? That's step 1. As we move into pillar number 2, identify where your money will be coming from and when. And usually in school, if you're financing your education, that's coming from your student loan refunds. So you might be getting that as a fall disbursement and a spring disbursement. Maybe some schools do a fall, spring, summer disbursement if you're attending the institution for the entire 12-month period in the academic year, but usually it's going to fall in the fall and spring. Other outlets, you may have a savings account that you're using. Maybe you've built up some savings and you're going to pay for your legal education out of that pot. Or maybe you're going to continue working. If you're going to be a part-time student and you're going to continue to work while you're in law school, you'll be generating that paycheck every 2 weeks, every month, however you're paid that way. And then we look at things like scholarships and other gifts. Maybe you have familial or spousal support to help you along this journey. But these are the ways that we look at money coming in as we get prepared to have money going out. So when we're talking about building that law school budget, everything's going to be focused on the cost of school itself. And if you have access to your financial aid department, you want to contact them as soon as possible and figure out what your cost of attendance is at your institution. Here we have the average law school cost for 2021. And these are broken down between public schools if you're a non-resident, and then private schools. And you can take a look at the differences in prices there. But for the purposes of calculating what kind of loan refund you're going to be using and how to expense that over the academic year, we're going to look at the average living and book expenses for the public resident, that $22,037. So when we're calculating our income as a student, again, if we're financing this, we're going to be looking at the example of that 22,037. And for this purpose, we're going to go ahead and divide that by 12 months. For this case study, this student wants to budget that $22,000 over the next 12 months. So they want that stipend to take them all the way up until their next academic year. And what that looks like, if we take 22,000 and change, divided it by 12, that gives you that monthly budget of about $1,836. So that is now your monthly income. So instead of using it as I get a fall disbursement and a spring disbursement, now we can gauge it out on a monthly basis. And if you get those large refunds, say in the fall and say in the spring, you're going to get them all at once. So budget it out as an idea, as a strategy on a monthly basis for that 1836, then keep the rest of that in your separate savings account so you can access it later when you need it, but it's not just sitting there waiting to be spent. Okay, and we're on to pillar number 3. We want to plug these numbers that we just got from our calculation into a tool using either a line item or a bucket approach. And we'll get into those approaches in a minute. But when we're plugging these numbers in, we want to use an approach that we're actually that's going to benefit us, that we're actually going to use, something tangible that we can come back and look at and see if we wrote something down, see how we're tracking it at that point. So here's a couple examples. I grew up on spreadsheets. I'm a big spreadsheet proponent. My wife is not a spreadsheet proponent. So every time I try to show her what's on our budget spreadsheet, I get her eyes roll in the back of her head. It's not her deal. She's much rather on her phone. So on her end, she has Mint Mobile. That's what we use. I use spreadsheets. She uses Mint for her half of it. But those are two great options. There's no right or wrong answer for whatever approach that you're going to use, as long as it works for you individually. Spreadsheets can log in, or not log in, but you can access the spreadsheet and plug in all the formulas and get everything spit back out to you. If you're going to use Mint Mobile, or you need a budget, maybe every dollar, those apps, they have free aspects to them where you can log in and link certain accounts for free. And they also have paid options where you pay that monthly fee through the App Store or the Android store, whichever kind of method you have. But there are free and paid options to them. And also on our website, if you go to askedna.accesslex.org, you can access this monthly spending plan, where if you want something tangible in your hands, you can print this off and actually fill it out by hand. And we want to make sure we're choosing something that's going to benefit us in the long run, something we can keep track of on our end. So we talked earlier about those budgeting approaches, whether it be line item or bucket based. And what we're looking at for line item, it's really a traditional zero-based budget where you're really focusing on those income versus expenses. We talked earlier about money coming in, money going out. This is a really hands-on approach where you track it frequently, maybe even down to the day, kind of like if you had a checkbook, or maybe your parents or somebody in your family used to keep a checkbook and they used to write down every transaction on a daily basis and do the math right there. That's how frequently we can track this. We can break it down on a daily basis. But maybe your approach, maybe you want to go toward, I want to do that more periodically. I don't want to log in every day and type in what I'm doing every day. Maybe that's a bucket approach. It's streamlined, really focuses on what's called conscious spending, and we'll get into that in a moment, but it focuses on broader categories. So you're dumping money in different buckets each month. Again, this goes back to tracking it periodically, as opposed to tracking it very frequently. There's no right or wrong answer. Again, we go back to what helps us sleep at night. So as long as we can get to bed at night and get a good night's rest, and that's working for you, that's the answer. So when we're talking about those line item budget approaches, you can see this is broken out into very, very succinct categories and for different amounts, looking at 35% for housing and utilities, 10% each for miscellaneous, recreation, saving, insurance, transportation, and then 15% for food. So we talked about needs and wants earlier. This is all inclusive of everything you wrote down for needs and wants, and it's broken down at a very, very low level, low-hanging fruit on this category. So if we use the example of that 1836 refund we were getting every month, this is what it's going to look like. So we take that 35%, that now turns into $643 for housing and utilities, then $275 for food, and $184 for each category without, or thereout, excuse me. So when you're looking at this, you might say $643 a month, there's no way I can live on that. Okay, so then we have to focus and say, okay, maybe not 10% for miscellaneous, not 10% for saving, not 10% for insurance. We can adjust those accordingly. So maybe we take them down to 7%, 6%, whatever you can make it fit within that housing and utilities category, essentially borrowing from another category. The other aspect we talked about before was that bucket approach. And already you can see the difference between the pie charts. The bucket approach is much simpler to read. Now you're focusing on needs, wants, and savings. One model we talked about earlier, that 50-30-20 model, where you break it down. Hey, 50% of my income, that's my needs. 30%, that's my wants. And I've got 20% left over that I'm going to save every month. But how does that look with that $18.36 a month we were looking at before? Okay, your needs, the roof over your head, food in your belly, transportation back and forth to campus, about $9.18 a month. Then you've got your activities, the wants that you want to do, $5.51 a month, and savings at $3.67. Again, 50-30-20 doesn't have to be designed to work for everybody. Maybe you look at it as a 60-20-20, 65-30, 5%. However you can make it work, whatever gets you to sleep at night, right? So we talked a little bit earlier about conscious spending, and the way we do this is we're categorizing our spending into different categories. So maybe those fixed costs or needs, our investment and savings goals, and then that guilt-free spending, those wants that we want to do outside of our education. If you can set up automated systems to transfer money to expenses and or your savings account, that's great. A lot of institutions have moved toward, I know the last institution I worked at used Bank Mobile. It would link to your personal account, and then you could further link that to your separate account. And you could transfer money in and out of that as you were getting your financial aid refunds. And conscious spending, you keep track as you go using that app, or in my case, a spreadsheet. Okay, on to number 4, the fourth pillar. We want to track our actual spending versus our planned spending throughout the cycle. So we really want to look at, I have this plan. Is my plan coming to fruition? Is it working for me? Or do I need to adjust it somewhere? And we can do that through a variety of outlets. We can do it through spreadsheets like we talked about before, or if you need to make an adjustment in one of the apps on your phone, we can do that as well. So we often run into, am I operating on a surplus budget or a deficit budget? For the surpluses, you're looking at things like, where can I put money for savings? Do I want to return any loan funding? Did I take out too much for the academic year and I'd like to return some? You can contact your financial aid office and absolutely do that. Do I want to start building an emergency fund? Or do I want to have a more individualized conversation? Contact us at AccessLex through Max Coaching. You can do that through askedna.accesslex.org. You can contact any of our accredited financial counselors for an individual conversation on your strategy. The other side, looking at deficit, are we trying to reduce expenses? And while we're doing that, are we also trying to increase our income? If you think I'm only borrowing for school, so do I really have an option to increase it? You can always have a conversation with your financial aid office and see if there are any cost attendance budget adjustment opportunities. Some schools do it, not all, but some schools do it, depending on what they have in their cost of attendance already. When I was working at the administrator level, I used to operate cost of attendance budget adjustments for things like computer purchases, because we mandated that students had to have a computer for education. We also did childcare if they had to have if they were taking care of their children outside of the classroom. Or another big one was health insurance. Since they were required to have health insurance, we offered a budget adjustment opportunity for health insurance. We also look at relief resources, and again, focusing on max coaching calls if you want to have a more individualized conversation. And when we talk about savings, you're like, oh, I'm a student. What do I need to save for? What expenses can I possibly save for? Well, there's additional expenses coming down the line, as we know. We look at those bar exam fees, where those can operate anywhere between $150 and $1,500, depending on the jurisdiction you're applying for. What about travel costs for the exam? Are you able to take it right down the street, or are you going to go, an hour and a half away to a testing facility to go there? What about bar prep? That can be the most costly study material you purchase the entire time you're in law school. Generally, it's going to cost up to $3,500, maybe even $5,000 for some of these study materials, depending on how many you use and what works best for you. Also thinking about living expenses on an annual basis. Is the place you lived during your 1L year going to change to your 2L year, to your 3L year? Do you feel comfortable living there all 3 years? Things to think about, because moving can be expensive if you're going to do it in between academic years. And then professional expenses. You're going to need professional clothing to do your interviews, to do your internships. If you move, like we talked about before, whether it be during your law school track or maybe transitioning into the professional world, that costs money to move as well. And then we're talking about interviews before moving. If you're going to interview at multiple places, going back and forth, maybe you're interviewing in a state other than where your institution lies, and you're traveling out to go try and get a job there. These are things to think about. They get progressively stronger to think about as we transition from 1L to 2L to 3L. But keep it in the back of your mind, if I have any 1Ls on the call tonight, these are costs that are going to come up later on in my education. So when we talk about habits, habit forming as a student can make or break your professional career. The habits that you develop as a student are going to follow you into your professional life. Don't think for a minute that just because you don't have a paycheck now, that the actions you take when you don't have a paycheck are magically going to change when you get a paycheck. We want to institute, again, these 5 pillars. We want to do those building blocks for success. We want to build them up and create these good habits. So think about ways when you're creating your budget, try to create it 1 to 2 weeks before the upcoming cycle. So then when you get the refund, you can start planning it out and make sure that you are on the right track. Build your budget with your partner or share it with an accountability person. If you have a friend and you're really into spreadsheets, compare spreadsheets with each other and see, hey, are you doing this? I'm doing this, and see if it's the right answer for one or both of you and where it differs. And then you can also reconcile your actual spending with your budget every few days, every few weeks, every few months, depending on how often you'd like to look at it. And adjust spending as you make your way through the month. As 1L's coming in, it's a great practice to take your budget and really examine what it's going to look like in either August or September for that full month. And then come back at the end of that month and see, what did I excel at? Pat yourself on the back if you met one of your goals. And then maybe if you need to work on something else, jot it down, try to take care of it the next month, but really focus on creating these great habits as we transition from 1 to 2 to 3L in the professional world. Then you can tweak budgets again, month to month based on actual tendencies. Holidays coming up, people always spend more money at the end of the year than they do at the beginning of the year. Something to think about. Adjust, mitigate, or eliminate your spending exposures based on your goals and habits. What we're really trying to do here is create those positive aspects as we move forward. We understand now where our income's coming from. We understand where our expenses are going. Then what do we think about after that? What are we going to do next? Now that I have money in my account, where is it going? How do I adjust moving forward? Okay, Tracy, do we have any questions from the panel?
We have a question here, and I'm going to read it to you. I worked for a number of years and made some student loan payments before law school. How can I apply for the student loan forgiveness program?
Yeah, absolutely. So for public, it's multifaceted, and you'll learn during your 1L year, your professor will say, well, it's complicated and it depends. And the way it works is any employment that you've had and you've made payments on it, if it's qualifying employment. So if you've worked for a nonprofit, you want to make sure you get that employment certified, and you can do that through studentaid.gov, right? Studentaid.gov, it'll show you the information. You can type in even your employer identification number from your previous employer and make sure that it's qualifying employment. So if you've been making payments prior to law school, you want to make sure, one, that you have the right kind of loan. You want to make sure you have a direct loan through the federal government. If you don't have a direct loan, maybe you have a FFEL loan, FFVL from years back, or any other kind of federal loan that is not direct, you can apply for what's called a direct loan consolidation, again, through studentaid.gov. You'll go through direct loan consolidation, verify your employment to make sure that those payments count, and they'll come back and make sure that those payments are up to date. Now, moving forward, if you're a student now, for payments to count on any student loans, there has to be a payment due, so to speak. So if you're going to transition into law school, you're going to enter what's called in-school deferment, where no payments are due on those loans. There isn't a way to make those payments count for public service loan forgiveness because there's no payment due from the federal government. So as long as you're in an active repayment plan and you've made a qualifying payment under a qualifying employer while working for a qualifying employer, yes, you can absolutely make those count. I had another chat question come through. How do you recommend improving chances of getting scholarships if your GPA is below the 3.0 threshold? There's a litany of scholarship opportunities out there. One that I will mention is on our website. Again, you can achieve that through askedna.accesslex.org. We have the AccessLex Law School Scholarship Data Bank, and there are over $3.3 million of scholarships that you can search through our search engine. I can tell you with certainty, not all 3.3 million gets awarded every year. And I believe there are just over 800 individual scholarships in our search engine right now. And these are carefully vetted by us at AccessLex. to make sure that no information will be shared and nobody's going to be contacting you or hounding you after they got your information. These are all carefully vetted. Nothing is shared, just opportunities for scholarships out there via our website. I also promote fastweb.com to students. These are for external scholarships. Obviously, there's no longer institutional scholarships. You can always contact your financial aid office or who handles institutional scholarships at your institution to see if there are any non-merit-based scholarships available. Just depends on the institution you're with. Great question. Websites for scholarships, please. Yeah, sure. I will type this in. Chat panel. It's askedna.accesslex.org. Absolutely. Great question about scholarships. Thank you.
Yeah, getting a scholarship definitely helps your budget, budget planning.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, everything will, again, remember, everything will fall under the cost of attendance for your institution. So to make the numbers easy, just as an example, if your overall cost of attendance is $50,000 to attend institution A for 1 year, and you get a tuition and fees scholarship for $25,000, that's great that it took care of tuition and fees. Now you're limited in your eligibility for a loan refund. Now you're only eligible to borrow up to your cost of attendance, which is that other $25,000. So even though you're going to get this scholarship and it's free money, that's fantastic. Still make sure you're figuring that into your budget.
Very good point. Well, I don't think we have any additional questions at this time, but we want to thank everyone for joining us today, and a special thank you to Justin Zieman and AccessLex Institute. We hope that you'll join us for upcoming virtual office hours programming. Please visit the ABA website for more information on that. And we'll be sending everyone a link to the replay for this presentation, along with the PowerPoint slides. Take care, everyone.
Right. Thank you very much, Tracy. Have a great night, everybody.